Welcome to another edition to Motivational Sundays with Kevin and Friends. This show was originally created from the more than 300 motivational quotes I created for the contents of my books. And with over 40 years of studying human behavior, I was always curious how one quote landed on one person and how another interpreted that quote. So I got together with my friends, Mr. Rick Dumont, Lois Campbell, Vanessa Vida, all right, Anne Marie, our show host of her podcast, and then Denise, which is always my conscience sitting back there, and then Christopher and Gilda, the couple of that are naturally meant to be together. No, they're that one. Some of us has to be forced into it. This is what God's plan was when you look at them. And then I had to bring in the voice of our show, Mr. Odis Spencer. And we got together. We meet every Sunday at 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. This is probably the only podcast that everyone is welcome as long as you bring something positive. Um, so we toss out a quote that's brought to us by one of the people on the panel, and based on our interpretation and perspective, we share how this quote lands on us. So without being said, for me to getting long-winded, it's the holiday season, got a lot to talk about. I'm going to go ahead and start the show. So I'm going to introduce you to the voice of our show. That man has a silky smooth sound to his voice. He's that voice that you want on the other side of your pillow. He's that uncle. He's that uncle when you need someone to talk to. He's the one that tells you the truth. And this quote will support what I just said about Mr. Otis Spencer. If you'll be so kind, brother, deliver the quote brought to us by Christopher.
Grand Rising, everyone. Happy Sunday. And today's quote: "You are what you do, not what you say you will do." By Carl Jung.
By Carl Jung. All right. Carl Jung sounds like he's got a house full of kids when he said this. So, Christopher, one, and for those of you who are new to our show, this will never end the way that I introduce Chris because I come from a military family. And for those of you that have people that have served this country, either people that have served this country because they love this country or people that serve this country because they were trying to free this country. Christopher, thank you for your service and thank you for serving a country that sometimes doesn't serve you. We appreciate your military service and we honor your better half, Gilda, for being there to welcome you home, to embrace you, to encourage you, to hold you up when you had trouble standing on your own, and to be that sounding board when you have things that you couldn't say in public, but she listened to you. So thank you both for your service. So Christopher, you brought a great quote to us today. All right, and this quote is so powerful. Not only am I going to let you tell us why you brought the quote, I'm also going to come back to you at the end of the show before I speak and talk about this quote again. All right, so Christopher, if you don't mind, how does this quote land on you?
First, Grand Rising, and thank you again, Kevin. It was my pleasure. My tendency to serve is just part of my DNA, I guess. This quote, boy, it was hard. Now, I'll explain why this quote was so difficult. It's a quote that I pretty much lived by my entire time in the service, but I've got to explain a bit about the service. Even though I guess it was in the 40s, 42, when Roosevelt signed the, what do you call it? Women accepted in volunteer service, basically the WAVES program, where we brought women into the service. The military has always been, and even still today, is a boys' club. And in a boys' club, the first thing you do is, well, it sort of goes back to that adage, you never cuss in front of your mother. Well, once you enter the boys' club, cussing became your second language. And that became my problem. This particular quote I've lived with my entire time in the service, but every single iteration of this quote contains profanity, from S or get off the pot, action talks, BS walks, everything. I mean, every single portion of this quote is just littered with profanity. And it took Carl Jung and a lot of searching for me to find a clean version of this quote. And it's one that simply makes sense to me. It's one I've lived by. And when you're brought up in a family of 8, okay, you're not noticed unless you do something, unless something you created, something I did myself, mommy. Look at me. You can talk all day long, but it's what you actually accomplish that makes the grade or makes the mark. You are what you do and not what you say you will do is basically what, is the principle I was raised on. I live by that. I do, to a certain degree, will grade others by that, but not so harshly that I won't accept anything else that they do. But let's go back to what was your girl? Janet Jackson. One of the lyrics from her song, "What have you done for me lately?" And it all points to action, what you've actually done. Not what you say you're going to do, not what you promise you're going to do. Show me what you've done. But I will also step back for a second and state that what you have done in the past should not be overlooked as what you're capable of doing today. We have people who say, I will do this, I will do that. And in reflection, what they've done, what their past dictated, can be somewhat contradictory. I think Janet Jackson says it best. What have you done for me lately?
Well, Janet Jackson with the quote. You know something, to our listeners, I don't know how you're interpret what has just been said to you, but I think if you had to put one word on there, it'd be intentional, and be mindful of your words. Um, so I appreciate you bringing this quote, and I am so curious how it's going to land on one of our much younger guests over here, Vanessa, and see how she interprets this quote. Because it's amazing. Because when we talk as men, there's a conversation that we hear, but when we talk to women and say this, our interpretation of what they heard is not exactly what we have said. So I'm just curious exactly how this quote lands on our female counterparts, the great ones, our queens. So Queen Vanessa, how does this quote land on you?
Well, it was funny. Hello, everyone. Buenos dias here from sunny Fort Lauderdale. It was quite profound. I said this was going to be quite an interesting show because it's something that is mentioned to me all the time. And also as a mother, it is also used. And I think it was quite interesting that Christopher had mentioned that the military is part of the good old boys club, because I always find myself being part of that for some weird reason. And yeah, you have to definitely, I mean, when we are leaders, when we are parents, you definitely have to be a role model. And your children, your counterparts are a reflection of you. Whether it be, your spouse, whether it be your children, whether it be your business partner, whomever it may be, your energy, your power, the way you are resonates onto them. So it was very profound. Also, just because I am a speaker, I do speak a lot, and I have the heart to do a lot of things, and I say I'm going to do a lot of things, but I tend to spread myself thin. So I don't always get to do what I say. But it's because it's on my schedule, not on yours. So with that being said, it's quite a profound quote. Thank you very much, Christopher, because it was definitely a whistleblower for me as well for this week. So thank you. And that's how it sits with me. Cheers.
And that's one of the most wonderful things about any quote. Sometimes it puts a exclamation point on the things that you've done or doing. It holds you self accountable. It's a reality check for some of us. And sometimes we need to be reminded. Many of us go through life hanging on empty promises, what we're going to do, what we want to do, and whatever, and we never seem to deliver. And this quote puts that exclamation point on the power of your words. And I've always said, when you connect one word to another, it will reveal your story. And sometimes we're not listening to our own story. So with that said, we have two great educators that are responsible for editing the stories of children that show up in their room with a belief system that is not actually factual truth, because we have a responsibility and people don't even realize it. We pass on information to our children and expect our children to go ahead and pass that information on. And then when they start to realize that, it's like my father told me, he says, you know, um, eating your vegetables will grow you muscles. And I said, the only thing that ever grew me muscles, all those damn push-ups my dad made me do. So I should have used some letters to that, right, Christopher? I should have used BS or something like that instead of saying it. Oh my gosh, I'm going to hell today. All right. So with that, without that said, without being saying more, making myself feel stupid because I'm trying to find words to introduce Anne Marie. She has a wonderful podcast. You guys should listen to it. If you haven't listened to it, I'm going to say shameless plug, subscribe to her podcast. Anne Marie, you speak to a lot of important people from ages from 6 through, I guess when you enter high school, you're 14. When I say important people, because children are our future, in your words and your impact, sometimes you are probably the only person that makes sense to the life they're living. And my hat goes off to every educator that we have on this platform, and we have a few. And I love showcasing you guys because you guys do not get enough credit for what you do and your contributions. You spend your money on supplies. They're not being supplied by an institution that demands that kids be accountable. You spend your time and have conversations not being had at home. And sometimes you provide not only food for thought, but actual food for a child that hasn't had a meal in massive amount of hours of not being fed proper nutrition at home. So with this said, Odis, before Anne Marie, just for our listeners that just tuned in, can you repeat the quote one more time?
You are what you do, not what you say you will do.
Okay, Grand Rising, everybody. Thank you for that introduction. I will say to you that my voice is a little hoarse because last evening was wonderful. The opportunity to invite students it's a place called Bus Boys and Poets, and it's an eatery, and they had the opportunity to recite some poetry and know what it feels like to be on stage. And they are like 12, 13 years old. So it was a great experience for them. You are what you do. Oh my goodness. I think about our character because we promise people that we will do X, Y, and Z, but sometimes you find yourself overextended and you don't do all the things that you've promised. So people will remember you for what you've done, uh, or what you didn't do. So back in the day when I was growing up, there's something called giving your word. So I'm going to show up. I'm going to do something because I gave my word that I would be there. And that is how you were known. And that is how relationships and trust is developed. So we need to be careful about what we say. And I'm learning this whole spectrum of boundaries, that the boundaries will keep us from overpromising. Boundaries will keep us from saying that we're going to do something that, in fact, we know it's not possible for us to do. That's our relationship with others. But what about our relationship with ourselves? It's, oh my goodness, that we honor ourselves when we can do the things. We're going into a new year, and we'll make all of these resolutions. And after 30 days, by February, we would have broken those resolutions. So the quote, "You are what you do, not what you say you will do," it can be a call to action. We can make it so. And the call to action is, what do you promise yourself? What do you promise yourself in terms of your personal growth? And most people focus on health and physicality, but what do we promise ourselves emotionally, mentally, socially? I'm going to do this for myself. This is how I'm going to take care of who I am as a human being. And so the quote offers accountability, because you become what you promise yourself. Here's the beautiful thing, is that if you set with intentionality, what it is you want to do, and you do it. The first part, you are what you do. That's where the growth happens. That's where you become something that you take a step towards who and what you want to be. And that's what you create something new for yourself. So the quote is a call to action. It's accountability. It reflects your character. It's an opportunity. It's an opportunity to honor yourself. And guess what? People are watching. People are watching because they are inspired by what you say and what you do, and that inspires them. And then you have made an impact. And I think that's why we're here on this earth, to make a positive impact for others. That's how the quote lands on me.
And all these times when I was a much younger Kevin, all right, I was probably much smarter, and smarter means smart A. My grandfather would interpret this. I never thought I was actually listening to my grandfather when he was speaking to me and pouring knowledge into me. But as you would say, the truth lies within the lie you tell yourself. And if you can live with the conversation you're having with yourself, then that describes exactly who you are and how you show up. And I am so glad, Anne Marie, you are showing up as one authentic person, because you're giving back to others. And every educator is giving giving back on such a high level with little bit of return. Your return is probably not going to show up until 40 years later, till you show up on a podcast like I did and give thanks to Coach Joe Russo that helped form and save me going through high school, because everything I learned about life, I learned playing high school football, and from a 21-year-old kid himself was teaching me these life lessons. And you, as well as the other educators that we have on here, I want to give thanks to you and thank you for your share, and thank you for having such a dynamic podcast. What is the name of your podcast?
About this life, changing our lives one day at a time.
And to my listeners, if you have not subscribed or followed her podcast, go on any place where you can get your podcast and subscribe and follow. She needs the help, and she's killing it as we speak right now. Now, I will tell you, as a person that is intentional, we all have busy lives. No one's getting paid to be on this show. But when I get a person that no matter where she vacations, and Denise has done this too, but Lois Campbell is sitting over in a beautiful tropical island. Mosquitoes are biting her in between a set. She hadn't scratched since we started this show, and she's all ready Lois Campbell, you're being true to your word. You said you're always going to show up, and you always do, regardless of internet connection is strong or weak. You show up and you deliver. So when you hear the quote, "You are what you do, not what you say you will do." How's this quote land on you while you're sitting in Jamaica, island girl?
Beautiful, beautiful. Again, I'm happy to be a part of this podcast.
I knew that was going to happen. The
Happy
island
to
has
be
gotten.
here on Sundays. I really look forward to it. This cold, oh my God. Is it freezing? Oh, okay.
No, just
So
keep
you are
talking.
what you do, of course. You are what you do. So I want to side with Anne Marie. Uh, you have a big accountability, not only to your coworkers, but to your patients. So saying that you will do what you say you'll do, you have to do it. And that makes you do what you say you will do, if that makes sense.
That
So
makes it.
it's a big it's a big accountability. Um, the other part of it is, yes, it's done in church a lot. It's do as I say, but not as I do. So I don't know how that relates to it. I guess a lot of times we will teach people things and say, do what I tell you to do, do what I say, but not as I do, because they're living a totally different life. But no matter what we do, we're accountable. We're accountable to ourselves, and we're accountable to the public, the people who we meet around us. So that's how it lands in me from the islands. Thank
An
you.
island girl, way to go, way to go. And thank you for always showing up. Thank you for being true to your word and to our listeners. I hope that you're learning something from the little snippets of our interpretation on this, because I'm sure that one day you're going to come on the show yourself, because we're probably the only platform that we invite total strangers in. So if you want to go to RMK Productions on our YouTube page and look up Motivational Sundays, down in the description is a link to this show. The only thing we ask you to do is to show up with a positive attitude. We don't do drama. We don't, for the young person that showed up last year that happened to have to go to the bathroom while he's doing his show, it wasn't funny. It just made you look bad. All right. So don't do that again. So if you got that type of mindset, this is not the platform. All right. We only want to educate people. And that's the reason why we have Mr. Rick Dumont on our show. And when you talk about you are what you do, you cannot be an independent filmmaker, not show up on time, not produce, not put the best of characters in order to tell a story of someone that has spent countless hours writing words on a page, and then leaving the responsibility to the filmmaker to bring his dream or her dream alive. You also can't be a world-class grandfather, which some of us are, and grandparents on here, and not be true to your word. Because I'm going to tell you, even an 8-year-old knows BS when they see it. All right. They always know it. Oh, here goes Aunt Carol. She's coming at it again. We know it. You don't even have to wear a sign. And an actor himself, good looking man. I wish I can grow a full beard like this. Rick, I want to welcome you to the family. It's not a show. We have a family. And
Honored to be here.
I'm just curious, how does this quote land on you?
Well, first of all, Kevin, I want to say thank you for having me. And you're a good-looking man yourself, so don't sell yourself short. And I
Wait
love.
a minute, Rick, can you
Yeah,
do me a favor? Can you
sure.
repeat that? I don't hear that often. Go ahead.
You are a very handsome man.
Thank
Uh,
you.
no, like hearing everybody talk before me, I appreciate that because everybody's insights, there were pieces of what everyone said that definitely filters into my existence, and starting with looking at myself in terms of that, I am a person who generally speaking has a very low self-esteem and low self-confidence. in so far as who I see myself as in the moment, but am constantly reminded by my wife, who has been such a healing support system for everything that I've gone through early in life, and what led me to be so critical of myself, to recognize, as well as all my amazing friends, including Odis and Christopher and Gilda, over the years, reminding me of the things that I have done, and I what I stand for as a human being. That I'm a contributing member of society, a positive influence on people in society, and when I take that step back from myself and look at what my life has been, and what are the things that I've done, and the work that I've done, whether it was as a 911 dispatcher or as a journalist, and some of these things, I tend to see, well, I guess I have done some good things for humanity, for society, for the planet, in raising kids. One of the thing I always say, often, is one of my greatest accomplishments is my son, specifically, as he has grown into this amazing young man. I say young because he's younger than I am, obviously, but he's in his 30s now. But this is a guy who I taught from a very young age about specifically respecting women, because one of my efforts in life was always, working to raise awareness and combat domestic violence and sexual violence. And two of the greatest honors of my life that was bestowed upon me was I was invited as a reporter, to speak with a survivors group of women. And I'll tell you, the stories were horrendous, turn your stomach, bring you to tears kind of stuff. But the fact that they brought me in to speak to these, their fellow, survivors, was an honor that will never be equaled by any Oscar or any Academy Award, any of these awards that you get as a filmmaker or an actor or anything else in life. But I instilled that in my son. And the fact, and I'm going on a wild ride here, but
That's okay. We enjoy the
bear
trip.
with me. uh, I was given one of the survivor groups that I did work with as a journalist. They gave me bracelets. This was years ago. These rubber bracelets, the purple one, and on it said, "Love is not abuse. Abuse is not love." And I gave one to my son when he was like, oh God, he must have been about 15, 14, 13, somewhere in that range, teenager. And over the years now, this was back in the 2000s. So over the last 15, 20 years, every time his bracelet breaks, he comes to me saying, "Dad, I need a new bracelet." So he's been wearing a bracelet for half of his life. And he's a guy who stands firmly, like I do, against abusing women, or, in any way, shape, or form, which to me is my greatest accomplishment as a human being, is just to have a child, especially a young man, who believes in that same philosophy as I do. Even though, like, going back in the day, you talk about do as I say, not as I do. That was my dad's mantra to us. Like, why are you smoking, Dad? Why can't I smoke? Do as I say, not as I do. But he also was a man who did a tremendous amount of work for young people in trouble. He grew up in Charlestown, Boston. So he was a street kid, moved to the country and became a juvenile cop, where he worked with all these troubled kids very, very closely and very, very strongly in youth sports and empowering. He wasn't much of a father, but a great outside the house with other people's kids. So I'm kind of in that headspace of recognizing the stuff that I have done kind of just out of a natural ability or a natural flow, if you will. And realizing that my dreams of doing XYZ, or I do try to, do everything I possibly can to accomplish and and yeah, accomplish those promises. But looking back at all the things that I've done, I'm like, you know, I guess I am a decent person. I try to be that way. So it's a lot of self-evaluation that I do, and that's what that quote really means to me. Is I take that step back and kind of look at my history and go, okay, I guess I'm not a bad person here, so that's good.
Yeah, you know something. It is nice that you acknowledge and give yourself your roses, and it's amazing. And excuse me. And when I talk about the people that are educators by profession on this platform, we're all educators. And believe it or not, our parents do the best that they can with what they know. And it's up to us to learn or to unlearn some stuff, and then to pass that down on to our children, our family, and friends. And believe it or not, we only judge by our actions. And if we have a lack of actions, then the judgment is high. If our actions show and prevail and shows the people that we are, you know, it talks about our character, our tenacity, our intentions, and whatever other adjective you can ask for that. And at the end of the day, we all answer to the same place. All right. We either leave this world with a story to be told that's be repeated, so we always live, or we leave this world with a story that no one wants to tell. So I know this is going to be hard to follow Gilda after this. And she is the better half of Christopher, a woman. You know, when you talk about the shock that's heard around the world, or you talk about, you know, if a tree falls in the woods, does someone hear it? We're going to find out what happens after Gilda has spoken. Timber. Gilda, how does the quote land on you? Grand rising to you.
Well. Actions speak louder than words. That's how it landed on me.
You are judged by your actions or the lack of actions. So again, I'm going to turn the page and I'm going to peel back another layer to one of these heroes or sheroes. You know, I'm talking about our educators. I'm talking about Denise Lopes. I'm talking about, you know, when you have something to say and you want to be remembered, guess what you do? You put it in a book. She is a spoken word artist. She's an accomplished author. She's a freedom fighter for people that can't fight for themselves. That means her students over in Boston. She has faced so many different obstacles and have come out on top. So, Odis, if you don't mind, you know, that silky smooth voice of yours to repeat that quote for our listeners that are just hanging on and going, what's the quote for the day? Odis, tell them what the quote is for the day.
You are what you do, not what you say you will do.
All right, Denise, how's this quote land on you?
Oh, bom dia, bom dia. Okay. Um, like Gilda said, actions speak louder than words. So that's the thing I live by. And for me, my grandmother used to say, your word is your currency. So if you say you're going to do something, you need to do it. So that's what she used to say. Don't say you're going to do something and not do it. And for me, I had, like Anne Marie said, I had to set boundaries because I would say, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. And sometimes I would be so tired, so overwhelmed that I learned that no is a complete sentence. So I learned to say no and not overwhelm myself. And just do, like, for me, if I'm say I'm gonna do something, I'm gonna do it. If I can't do it, I'm gonna tell you no. And sometimes people expect you to say yes when you keep saying yes, 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 yes. And when you say no to them, they're like, why not? And it's like a thing I had to learn the hard way. Like, I'm giving people expectation of me doing stuff and like and killing myself over it. And after I don't do it. And even as my profession as an educator, like last year I was fighting. I was getting sick. And after I was like, no, I need to focus in one thing and say I'm going to do it. So my focus was in my classroom. That's something I could control. That's something I could give my all to my students. And that's one thing I've learned. And this thing is like my action will speak louder than my words. So might as well pour into my students, give them the love, teach them what I know what to teach, what I went to school for, and forget about the administrators that expect me to do miracles and don't help me at all. There's no support. So no is a complete sentence. and your word is your currency. That's how it lands on me.
All right. And pay it forward in full. And thank you for your gift. Thank you all for your gift. Now we're coming to the end of our show. All right. And the voice. All right. Before I go to the voice, Christopher, after listening to everyone's interpretation, with the exception of Odis and mine, how do you feel about this quote?
It still reflects exactly what I initially envisioned. I like some of the different views on it, though. I only briefly mentioned that a lot of times past actions can reflect on your personality, things you did in the past. But the idea of what Denise just said about your word being your currency, and to state that yes, I will do this, or better yet, prove that you're capable of by doing something better, can also reflect on not so much in your past now, but on the person that you are. So yeah, my initial thoughts and grab holes of this particular saying are still true, and everyone reflected that. Like I said, they did add a bit more to it, but come on now, I'll go right back to Janet Jackson. What have you done for me lately? You know.
All right, Odis, what have you done for me lately? Will you repeat that quote?
I showed up this morning, Kevin.
How does the quote land on you and the voice?
Well, let's look at it this way, and it's basically the same thing that others have said. If you want to be a good person, a good boss, a good leader, you need to lead by example. You don't ask people to do things that you aren't willing to do yourself. You know, as an employer, I've had a staff member years ago that wasn't willing to shovel, but I had to lead an example. I'll go out there and help you. And this employee then followed suit. Whereas I had another employee that I said, I need you to help our customer next door and do this particular task. That person wasn't willing to do it. And unfortunately, that person is no longer, or was no longer in my employment. So I had to go out there and do it myself. And that's how it lands on me.
All right. You are what you do, not what you say you will do, by Carl Chung. When I had this quote, it had me just sitting back and listening to my grandfather. Every time I had, wanted to go out and play and whatever, he would stop me, sit on the porch swing. I don't know if any of you guys had those old metal porch swings that set up there. And my grandfather used to speak to me. So I'm going to try to connect with my grandfather, my interpretation on how he would interpret this. He's the core of who you are, and what you are can only be defined by your actions. He said to me, and I've heard this many times, that life does reward action. He said the true character and your identity are only revealed by the things you have done or in the process of doing. Your intentions are those words that lay there on the page, or in a conversation with intentions or promises. Essentially, your words without meaning are just promises without action. Every person that we meet or come across in our life, we judge them by how they treat us, how they greet us, how they hurt us, or by their accomplishments and how it affects us, not by their wishes or what they want to do or what they claim that we do. We judge them by basically the impact they have on our lives. To judge one's character can only be highlighted by the ability for someone to be reliable, to hold themselves, like many people on the show have done, to be accountable, to be consistent in your words, to be consistent in your actions, to be trustworthy and committed to the shit you've done. Not that matters. And I should not have said that, right, Chris? I should have used the letter. Okay. Oh boy, I am so going to hell. This quote landed on me as self-reflection, just like Vanessa had said, and to be true to your behaviors and the values that you are taught. Um, Taught to me by my grandfather when he says, say um, not what you're doing, but talk about the things you've done. He said, there's no need to talk about it because a man and woman can only stand by their words. And if you don't stand by your words, the world will stand on your chest, forcing you to eat your words. So this took me back to the foundation of why I do this show, the lessons that I've learned, the conversations that have been poured into me by my grandfather. You know, Joe Phillips, I know I wanted to go out and play. I know that you may be late to commitments that I thought I was going to be there. And I know you didn't think that I was paying attention. But when you say reach one, teach one, those words stuck with me. And so hopefully people will judge me by actions. I tell my kids all the time, you're never going to hear your dad talk about what he wants to do and whatever. Judge me by the things that I'm doing. And that's the only time I will talk about it. So this show was part of the reason why I said, and my son held me accountable to it too, because I kept trying to make it perfect. And he says, just get it done, Dad. Just get it done. Thank you, Theo McLemore. So with that said, whatever the case, this quote for me is about state of mind. It's about your presence, what you're focusing on right now, and controlling the mindset that you can only control your own personal circumstances. So with that said, to grow, you must make some mistakes. To be confident, you have to address your anxieties. To forgive yourself, you must hold yourself accountable. To learn, you must unlearn some stuff. Pay attention to your teachers because they have your best interests in mind. And to exist, you have to show up on motivational Sundays every single week, and be more today than you were yesterday. And I want to thank each and every last one of you for your gifts because the mind of being fully present is your greatness and how you live. My grandfather always said, when you get to a place in life, you can help someone else out. He said, it's your duty to do so. He said, reach one, teach one. And with that said, we what?
Fade to black.
And ladies and gentlemen, we are out. Thank you, everyone, for listening. If you want to learn more or follow the show, go to RMK Productions on our YouTube page, RMK Productions and Network on our YouTube page. Subscribe, follow, and comment. Please share this video if you'd like to be on there. Look in the show's description. There's a link, and we would welcome you. Always bring something positive. It's the holiday season. I know I'm not supposed to date my podcast, but I'm going to say every day is a holiday that's above ground. So celebrate your life like it was the last day of your life. I said, laugh like it was how you made your a living, and love like you're auditioning for one of Rick's movies and how you wanted to write your story. All right. I know mine's going to be a dramedy. All right. I don't know about yours. So with that said, we're out. Until next week. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you.